Hello, je suis Pierre Ray. Today's bienvenidos, well, that's Spanish. Welcome. Today's topic is Resalest Remarkable Books for number 42. Okay, the first book today is The Great Gilly Hopkins by Catherine Paterson, 1978. Yeah, Catherine Paterson is a wonderful author of children's books. This is an outstanding book. The main character's name is Gilly, and she is a 12-year-old girl who had been growing up in foster families. These are children who, for whatever reason, their parents can't take care of them. And they're taken, and I guess there's no family to take care of them, so the government takes them and places them in these foster families who are paid to take care of them. And foster families have a very bad reputation of not treating the children well, or it's not their children, and they're being paid to do it. Anyway, she's having a tough time. She dreams of her mother, and of course, getting back to her real mother. But she finally finds love in a good foster family. Wonderful. In this family, there's a fat woman, a blind old black man, and a scared little boy. So, yeah, this is interesting. So she finally found a good foster family, which, these kids really need. They really need good, they're growing up. They need a family. They need to be loved and cared for. And so this has a happy ending for Gilly Hopkins. The next book is The Egypt Game by Zilpha Keatley Snyder, 1967. Wonderful children's book. It's set in California. And the characters in the story, there's this black boy, African American, a white boy, European American, and an Asian. And they start an Egyptian fantasy game. And they really have fun, and at the same time they help an old man to live again. Interesting. Children, part of growing up and childhood, at least traditionally, was these fantasy games that children have. And it's nice that in this case it was an Egyptian fantasy game, which gets into history and geography, and friendship, childhood, and creativity. These fantasy games are very important to develop creativity in life, and so this is a wonderful book, wonderful children's book. The next book is Tuck Everlasting by Natalie Babbitt, 1975. There's some confusion. I thought this was the sequel of the other book about tech. Anyway, it's not. It's a different author. This is not the sequel. And it's a wonderful children's book. It's about the Tuck family. And they live forever because of a certain water that they drink. Interesting. A young girl, Winnie, learns their secret and helps them to keep it. Very intriguing book. Of course, the Fountain of Youth, living forever. I wonder how. It's been I read this book in 2007, so I can't remember the details, but I remember I enjoyed it, and it had a very intriguing premise for living forever. Of course, we do live forever, actually, because in my belief, in our church, because of reincarnation, that as they say, there is no death. We just transfer. We leave our physical body, and we go on to the next world. Eventually come back because we have unfulfilled desires, things we want to do, and so forth. Of course, that's really off the topic here. The next book is Strawberry Girl by Lois Lenski, 1945. So this is a fairly old children's book. It's amazing how in modern times there have been so many children's books written, and the number of books available years ago weren't that many. But this really does go back some time, and it won the Newbery Award, so that's a good sign. It's a beautiful story. It's set in rural Florida in the early part of the 20th century, so the early 1900s. And there are two families. One's a good family. It's progressive, trying to move forward and get things done and accomplish things and and learn and so forth. And the other is an ignorant family, really kind of stuck in the mud, not doing well and having problems. So there's trouble and conflict between the two families. This is part of life. This must have been neighbors. And finally, kindness, love, and forgiveness defeat hatred and ignorance. Wonderful. Yeah, and this is the power of God, really, because God is greater than Satan. And there is evil in the world, there are problems. And yeah, we do have to forgive. When people can be very difficult and can be hurtful and cruel. And if we become angry with them and so forth, then there's never-ending trouble. So we do have to forgive. And actually, we can win people. I strongly believe we can win people over through. People might be difficult. Maybe they hate us for whatever reason. But if we are kind and patient and forgiving, we can win them over. Like they say, destroy your enemy by making him your friend. Wonderful. So I really recommend this book, Strawberry Girl. The next book is Belle Prater's Boy by Ruth White, 1996. This is another wonderful book, beautiful book, that also won the Newbery Award. It is set in 1953 in a small town in Virginia in the Appalachian Mountains. Two cousins face tragedy, the suicide of one's father and the disappearance of one's mother. However, life goes on. Yeah, just imagine what could be worse than that? The suicide of your father, and this is what this child is dealing with. And then in the other case, the mother just disappears. She gets fed up with married life or family life and so forth, and she wants to go off and just can't deal with it anymore. And then so all of a sudden your mom's gone. Very, very tough. Very, very tough. So anyway, these two cousins, since they have something in common, that's nice when we can make friends, especially when you've been through hardships, and you can make friends who've been through something similar, and you can compare notes and support each other and encourage each other, because it's true, life does go on, and we have to keep going, no matter what hard things happen. When I was a boy, my sister died. Very, very tough, my older sister, and all kinds of things happen in life, but the main thing is God loves us, and or as I call Divine Mother will never stop loving us. So everything will be okay. Everything will be okay because of that, because God does exist, and God loves us very, very much. So everything's fine, regardless of these tragedies are real, but we can survive them. We can be happy. We can be happy and productive no matter what. The next book is Thimble Summer by Elizabeth Enright, 1938. Well, this is a really much older children's book. It's also won the Newbery Award. I don't know if it wasn't as hard in the old days to win the Newbery Award because there weren't as many books written. Maybe I'm wrong about that. But nowadays, boy, it's amazing how many children's books have been written in recent times. The story is about a girl named Garnet, and she's growing up happily on a Wisconsin farm in the 1930s. So it talks about simple pleasures, family, nature, physical outdoor work, swimming, fishing, the county fair. So, on a farm, this was the background of most people, farming, and then not so many are into that now, but life on a farm, and you have there's definitely more, you have more of the great outdoors, a lot of work. That's why people moved out of farming, because there's so much work. But it's in a way it's pleasant because you're outdoors. You're not stuck in a factory or sitting at a desk in an office. And they have time to go swimming and fishing, probably fishing for food, swimming for fun. And the county fair, which was the big entertainment, when they'd have these people would come from various farms around the area to show off their prize pigs or their large watermelon, and have these and socialize with other people, and they'd have games that you could play, and like throwing a ball, knocking over milk bottles, something, and they'd have pie contests. People would bake pies and bring in various things, maybe their very large onion, and you'd win a best award for maybe the nicest cow, the best horse, and so forth. So this is a nice book. The next book is The Watsons Go to Birmingham, 1963, by Christopher Paul Curtis, 1995. This also won the Newbery Award. It's a story of an African-American family who are from Flint, Michigan. It's set in 1963. and it's all about the family life and culture of that time, African American families. And there's violence, humor, and music. Okay, so violence, going back to slavery days, this is a sort of a legacy, and humor really helps, sense of humor. That's why I liked living in the Philippines, because Filipinos have such a good sense of humor. Music is also very therapeutic and pleasant, nice thing. Anyway, in the story, this family goes to Birmingham, which is Alabama in the South. Actually, almost all African Americans have roots in the South, where slavery was, and Alabama was a southern state. So in the book, they go back to Alabama, Birmingham, Alabama, and they almost lose their young daughter in a church bombing. So this is a very readable book, entertaining, deals with life and struggle, and also the civil rights movement. Because in 1963, their African Americans were fighting for the right to vote and fighting to end segregation, where they were supposed to stay in certain places. And Martin Luther King was the main leader. And then, and a lot of the black churches were places where they were organizing, to fight back, to fight for equal rights. And there were these bombings, where, the bad guys, these racist people who wanted African Americans to forever be second-class citizens and to forever be restricted, and that was terrible. And so there was violence. And finally, the civil rights movement did achieve success, because African Americans did get the right to vote. Segregation ended. That means African Americans could go anywhere, live anywhere, and so things have really changed drastically from the bad old days. The next book is Old Ramon by Jack Schaefer, 1960. This is a short, fine, Newbery Award-winning novel. It's set in the Old West in the United States. Ramon is a wise old shepherd who teaches this boy in the book about nature and tending sheep, dogs, and the weather. Very fine. That's a wonderful topic, shepherds. Of course, Jesus Christ, metaphorically, was a shepherd leading his sheep, which would be all of us, or people who are willing to follow him. In this case, you have the shepherd. These sheep, they would be animals that were raised for their wool, which could be turned into sweaters, and they would have to, and they would be grazing on land, eating grass and so forth, and they have to move from place to place, so they have something to eat, grass to eat, and then you'd have the shepherd who would be responsible for their well-being, and then you'd have a dog would be involved in keeping some of the sheep would tend to wander away, and there you'd have to have a dog to keep them to stay together. Of course, you're in the great outdoors, wandering around, so you have the elements, the rain, and so forth. So this is a wonderful, wonderful book. The next book is Clearing the Bases by Alan Barra, 2002. This is a baseball book about Major League Baseball in the United States, and the author has new ideas. And he believes that Mike Schmidt was the greatest baseball player of all time, the power-hitting third baseman for the Philadelphia Phillies. He says that Mickey Mantle was better than Willie Mays. They were compared a lot, these power-hitting center fielders, both played in New York. Roger Clemens, the author claims, is the greatest pitcher ever. Clemens pitched for Boston Red Sox mostly, and then also the New York Yankees and the Toronto Blue Jays. And Tim Raines, he says, is better than Pete Rose. Tim Raines was the guy who played for Montreal. Really could hit high average, had a lot of speed. And he also says that Wilt Chamberlain was better than Bill Russell. Well, I guess that's debatable. But I think Chamberlain wasn't on good teams. I think he won 2 NBA championships. Russell won, I think, more than any other player. I think 12 championships. So this is an interesting book. The next book is Onion John by Joseph Krumhold, 1959. This is another fine Newbery Award-winning children's book. The main character is Andy. He's 12 years old. He lives in a small New Jersey town. He's friends with an old eccentric Hungarian who's called Onion John. Can't remember why they called him that, whether he raised onions or he ate a lot of onions and smelled like them. Of course, if you do eat onions, you get these onion breath. And the story, the father of this boy, Andy, the father wants Andy to become an engineer. parents have ambition for their children, and engineering requires, tough. Got to go to college, and it's a tough course. And the father owns a hardware store and considers himself a failure. Andy rebels against his father's dreams because he wants to be like his dad, whom he considers great. So this is very interesting. The father doesn't want him to be like him, and Andy's like, oh, I guess he wanted to live in this town and also be involved in, help work in the hardware store. And of course, the one thing that was touching, this Onion John is this kind of a funny old guy, and all the children liked him, and because he was kind of interesting and friendly, and then kind of and eccentric. But then the one thing that was touching, he told Andy, he says, when you're older, you won't want to be friends with me. And he says, well, why is that? And he said, because when the kids would grow up, they would feel embarrassed by Onion John, that he was this crazy old man, and so they would break off. Most of them would stop being friends with him. And Andy's like, no, I'll always be your friend. So I thought that was touching, that interlude and that relationship. The next book is Out of the Dust by Karen Hess, 1997. Yeah, Karen Hess is a wonderful children's book author. This book is a brilliant Newbery Award-winning children's novel. The main character is Billy Joe, who is 14 years old and living in the 1930s in Oklahoma, in what they called the Dust Bowl, because there were problems with the weather and the farm. Actually, Oklahoma isn't so great for farming, and so there were heavy winds and blowing the topsoil away. A lot of people were having hard times. Billy Joe, she loses her mother. Her mother dies in an accident, and Billy Joe's hands are burned, and she can't play the piano. So very hard times. I think this had to do with, they were cooking, I believe, and this a large vat of oil, of very hot oil, fell over, and I think that's how the mother died. And then Billy Joe plays the piano, and she can't play the piano anymore because her hands are so severely burned. So they're already having hard times, and her mother dies. But there's the triumph of the human spirit, hope and healing. Again, the same thing. This girl who experienced this terrible tragedy, losing her mother, and having serious physical health problems herself, and not being able to do the things she enjoyed, playing the piano. But, that's why I like books like this. At the end, there's a positive ending. Despite the hardships, this character, Billy Joe, is able to move on with her life and to live a good life, to be happy, and to be at peace with what had happened, and to continue to live and be productive, because life goes on. There's always hope, no matter what, because of the greatness of God. The next book is It's Like This Cat by Emily Neville, 1963. This also won the Newbery Award. It's a story of a 14-year-old young boy, Dave, who lives in New York City. He has friends, and he also has trouble with his father. He roams the city. So this is kind of interesting, set in New York City in the 1963, years ago. City life, so this is different. Yeah, and this is a common theme in life, fathers and sons in conflict. Very, very sad when this happens. And he has a cat, apparently, and he's exploring the city. Good for him. It's good to get out and see the world, and so I thought this was a real nice book. The next book is The Jim Thorpe Story, America's Greatest Athlete by Gene Shure, 1967. Oh, I really love this book. It's some consider Jim Thorpe the greatest athlete of all time in world history. He was an American Indian from the Sac and Fox Nation. He was a football star at the Carlisle Indian School, and then he played Major League Baseball for the New York Giants. And Jim Thorpe was a good guy, but he wasn't a pushover. And his manager was John McGraw, who was pretty tough, real tough guy. And so the thing is, Thorpe was an Indian. And this was a racist time. This is the early part of the 20th century, early 1900s. And so Thorpe had trouble getting along with John McGraw, who was a real taskmaster. Who knows, maybe have been hard on him at being an Indian, he thought. And, American Indians have their sense of pride, which they should. We all should be respected. And he also played in the NFL. Jim Thorpe was an NFL star. He actually coached the 1922 Marion, Ohio Oorang Indians. Just imagine. And at the 1912 Olympics, I think he won 4 gold medals. And later they were for, I think, running, hurdles, I think discus, javelin, stuff like that. And the medals were actually taken away from him. It was a very sad thing. They took his medals away because he'd been paid. Back then, you weren't allowed to. You're supposed to be an amateur to be in the Olympics, and he'd, I guess, been paid some money to play baseball. So later, the medals were restored. So really interesting guy. In fact, I saw on Amazon another biography of Jim Thorpe. I was interested in reading because he was a good guy, although he had a drinking problem, which was pretty sad. But a tremendous athlete in baseball, football, and in track and field. Interesting. The next book is Your Body Doesn't Lie by John Diamond, MD, 1979. Now this is an interesting book because the author talks about things which he claims he has evidence are poisonous. And I don't know, he had these certain ways to detect how certain things would affect a person's body. And according to him, anger is poisonous. And I think I'm sure that's true. Become angry with really, and he could prove medically when people become angry how they become, their body is weakened by this. Another thing he mentions is poisonous is bad posture. Well, I can testify to that because I developed bad posture as a boy, and I think it's been a real handicap my whole life. Because for whatever reason, from watching TV, and I wanted to look tough looking in the mirror. I want to look like a football player. I developed bad posture. And it's led to having less energy over the years and depression. Fear is another poison in life when people are afraid. That's why courage is such an important trait. He claims that most rock and roll music, most popular music, is poisonous, that people are weakened by it, whether they know it or not. Music has changed. I found, in fact, whenever I'm exposed to rap music, for example, I think, I feel sick. Back when the 70s, when I was a teenager, I listened to rock and roll because it was popular, but he claims that it's very harmful. Traditional music, like classical music, is positive, is healthful, and a lot of the old music, but music really deteriorated. Most modern music is poisonous. And he mentions also modern high-tech stuff also being poisonous and harmful. So how can we be healed? He mentions 2 things, love and nature. Love and nature. And of course, this is why spirituality is so important, because when we contact God through prayer and meditation, through spiritual reading, and we can contact the source of love and be healed. And also nature, this being out, and this is why city life can be really, really challenging. It's good to get to the ocean, the mountains, the trees, the birds, and so forth. So this is a really wonderful book. The next book is Gretzky, an autobiography by Wayne Gretzky with Rich Riley, 1990. Very interesting. And Wayne Gretzky, some consider the greatest hockey player of all time. Ice hockey, the National Hockey League. The famous Edmonton Oiler of the NHL tells his story. And the thing that jumped out at me from the book was the curse of fame, jealousy. Everyone wants to be, people have a desire to be famous, but very few people are. And then if you are famous, well, then people are jealous of you. And if people are jealous of you, that means they have ill will toward you, and they may want to destroy you, and they have a negative attitude about you, and that's all hard. That's challenging, and that actually is painful, And so when he was a very tremendous hockey player from a young age, and according to this book, he says that he left his hometown of Brantford, Ontario, at age 14 because so many of the parents in the town hated him. They were jealous for their children, for their own children, because he was a tremendous hockey player and better than their children, their sons. So he left, to get away from that, because this can be a challenge to these guys who are famous from small towns. Although Larry Bird's been able to do it, still goes back to, lives in his old hometown. A lot of guys have to leave because they feel there's all this jealousy that develops among people who've known them from the time they were young. Anyway, Wayne Gretzky is a good guy. It was very sad when he got traded to the Los Angeles Kings. But yeah, I remember back in the 80s, he was really famous and did so well. Tremendous hockey player. The next book is The Golden Boys by Cameron Stouth, 1993. This is the story of the 1992 U.S. basketball Olympic team. They called the Dream Team. It was the first Olympics when NBA players could play. Before then, the rule was, you had to be an amateur. In other words, you can't have been paid any money to play your sport. That's why Jim Thorpe got into trouble. But they finally changed the rules, and then these guys, NBA stars, were allowed to play, and it was an amazing, probably the greatest NBA basketball team of all time. Michael Jordan, Magic Johnson, Larry Bird, or what I used to call Larry's Bird, Karl Malone, John Stockton, Scottie Pippen, Patrick Ewing, or Patrick Ewing, as this one boy in the Philippines I heard say, Clyde Drexler, Chris Mullin. Yeah, really an amazing story. These guys, and I think they won every game, and they, by a large amount. And I think it was in Barcelona, Spain. And these guys were like rock stars. They were going out. It was really something. It was really something that they got a chance. Of course, things have changed a lot since then. The international players have gotten so much better. So the Americans now are getting competition when it comes to the All-Star game. And all these foreign players, they go and play for their own teams of origin, like Manu Ginobili for Argentina and so forth. Okay, the next book is Winds Across the Sky, a love story by Chris Foster, 1992. This is a beautiful book. The characters, I believe it's a novel, the characters include a disturbed Vietnam veteran, a frazzled actress, redwood trees, and a humpback whale. The themes include violence, hope, and love. Yeah, I remember the thing that I remember from this book is these humpback whales, according to this author, are highly advanced beings. And if you look at it's very tragic history of the last 200 years. Most of the whales, a large number of whales, have been killed because, for their oil, whale oil, and so the whale population has really been reduced. Yeah, they used to use, I think, whale oil for lighting. Anyway, so whales have really learned to be kind of scared of people, try to stay away from human beings. And then there's this, according to this book, the whales are more advanced. This is an interesting theory. They're more advanced than human beings, and they're kind of waiting for human beings to evolve, and so they're kind of curious. How have humans evolved? And so they'll come into these bays or come into a port to try to check out human beings, and human beings have evolved, and now they come and they don't get killed because now people really, we have a lot of nature lovers now, and people enjoy the whales, so they're fine. I would imagine the whales are happy. They're getting treated better. Although I think Japan is the Japanese are the ones that really hunt the whales the most. Now they're trying. This has been an international issue, trying to protect whales. Because people find them very, appealing. They're very endearing animals. These huge animals that live in the ocean. So it appears we're out of time. As Scarlett O'Hara always said in Gone with the Wind, tomorrow is another day. Live long and prosper. To quote the Star Trek, quote, may the force be with you from Star Wars. Thank you so much for watching. I hope you find a good book to read. God bless you, and I'll see you next time.